Welcome to your Aged Care Compass podcast. Join us to find out how to support your older loved ones at home. We're going to help you make sense of Australia's aged care system. We talk about legal and financial considerations for ageing and how chronic health conditions impact your older loved ones' well-being. And we share real-life stories of where it went wrong for people and how we got them back on track.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. 2 weeks ago, our episode about our dad's diagnosis of dementia got a lot of interest. If this is the first time you tuned into our podcast, we decided to discuss how our own father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and then mixed pathology dementia, and what that meant for him and us, his family. Over the coming weeks, we're recording a range of dementia-related episodes in response to you asking us to do this. It's such a broad topic and a very personal one, as no two presentations or journeys from diagnosis are the same. If you've listened to episode 25, Dad's Diagnosis of Dementia, you'll know that getting the diagnosis or being told what the diagnosis wasn't forthcoming from the geriatrician at that time, and it was left to Coral to explain to our parents, particularly Mum, what the medication Aricept was for and why that had been prescribed. In today's episode, we're going to chat about what happened after Dad was diagnosed and the challenges Dad faced, as we all did, in the months and years after he was diagnosed. Picking up where we left off 2 weeks ago, Coral, Dad had been commenced on the drug Aricept, which we know is prescribed for treating the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. But Dad and Mum hadn't been told that Dad had Alzheimer's disease, and it came down to you explaining this to our parents. What happened next?
After those difficult conversations with Mum in particular, explaining to her that Dad had Alzheimer's disease and, had been commenced on medication for that, Mum threw herself into finding out what treatments were available to Dad to lessen the symptoms or, ideally treat or cure the disease. Now, we know there is no cure currently for Alzheimer's disease. Dad had been commenced on the Aricept, and from a medical perspective, that was about as good as it was going to get in terms of supportive management. Dad was still on his medication for depression, and that continued. As I mentioned in our last episode, we did see a change in Dad after he commenced on the Aricept. He kind of returned to himself. His cognition did improve, and he was more engaged in life again.
Yep.
In doing her own research, Mum became aware of ginkgo biloba and turmeric. These natural therapies were marketed as the answer to treating symptoms of dementia at that time. Now, I'm a big believer in natural therapies, but I knew ginkgo and turmeric had no scientific data behind these claims. Mum really wanted to include a high dose of turmeric in Dad's diet, and she clung to the hope that this easy remedy would make a difference. I didn't want Mum to feel that there was no hope. So I let her keep doing her own research, buying turmeric supplements, and just being a supportive daughter, checking in on her and making sure she was managing okay with Dad's care. But we did have conversations about the success of turmeric and ginkgo, and I told her not to expect any miracles.
Yeah. So how did Mum respond to there being no miracle, Coral?
Well, dementia is a heartbreaking diagnosis, Shell. And even though we sometimes know in our hearts that that's what the diagnosis will be, it's not any easier when the words are finally said.
Yep.
Over time, some weeks, Mum came to realise that there was no miracle cure for dementia. She'd tell me about the research that was being done, scientific research, and I think for a time she hoped that there'd be something available for Dad to cure his Alzheimer's disease. Eventually she came to understand that there wasn't going to be a cure, and we had many conversations about what we could manage. how we would approach Dad's declining cognition. So this is where she put her energy, focusing on what we could influence and managing what we couldn't as best as we could.
Yep. And tell our listeners what you did focus on, Coral.
We focused on keeping Dad well and content, Shell. Mum and Dad always ate a healthy diet, so that wasn't something we had to change. He'd always been active, so we made sure that he continued to be active. Even as his mobility declined, we supported him to keep walking safely as much as he could. This meant he eventually was accompanied when he was mobilising. I encouraged Mum to ensure he drank enough water and made sure he didn't become constipated. And we were always on alert for brewing infections, particularly urinary tract infections and chest infections.
Let me just jump in here, Coral. Why did you focus on constipation and also infections? Wouldn't you be monitoring for this regardless of a person having dementia or not?
When a person is cognitively impaired, when they have a diagnosis of dementia, they're more susceptible to developing a delirium, Shell. So a delirium is an acute confusional state on top of a pre-existing cognitive impairment. This confusional state isn't a rapid worsening of the dementia. It's separate to the dementia, but it ties in with the dementia.
Right.
So when a person has dementia, there are many things that can cause a person to become acutely confused or suddenly confused. And this acute confusional state, the delirium, is awful.
Yeah.
So watching for things such as infection was important because I'd want to treat any infection before it led to a delirium. Constipation can cause delirium too. In fact, many things can cause delirium. An anaesthetic, a health event such as a heart attack, electrolyte imbalances, changes in medication, or even changes in the person's environment. So as a nurse, my radar was always on for preventing anything that would cause Dad to develop a delirium.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that for us, Coral. Constipation seems so avoidable, but can have a serious effect on someone with dementia. Flexicare is a not-for-profit organisation which supports older people living in Brisbane's southern suburbs to live their best lives in their own homes and communities. Flexicare don't have grand plans to be the biggest aged care provider. They want to be known for treating each one of their participants as an individual who they get to know well. They answer their phone calls personally when clients ring them. They give their clients easy access to a home care partner who can work with them to deliver the best mix of support possible. If you're in Brisbane South and want to know more, give their friendly team a call on 07 3422 8400 or check out their website flexi.org.au. So, what else did you focus on after Dad was diagnosed?
Well, apart from keeping Dad well and content, engaged with life and providing him with purpose, it was essential we supported Mum and made sure she was okay too. We made sure we checked on Mum all the time. We made sure she could take some time out if she needed to, which wasn't often actually. Mum was so patient and accepting in her support for Dad.
Yep.
But when Dad was sundowning, our strategy for managing that was to go around to their place at around 4 p.m. and collect Dad and take him for a drive. So he'd have something to distract him and keep him interested. It gave Mum a break at that time so she could have a shower or prepare dinner.
Sundowning. What's that, Coral?
Sundowning is a collection of behaviours that can occur in people with dementia as the disease progresses. It's recognised that these behaviours occur as the sun is setting or going down, hence the name sundowning.
Mm-hmm.
What we would see is an increased agitation, anxiety and disorientation, and sometimes hallucinations. Dad certainly became more agitated and disorientated late in the afternoon and through to the evening. So I knew what was ahead of us with the level of care Dad was going to need. So at that time, I actioned a referral to my aged care and had Dad assessed for a home care package. Dad received approval for a level 4 home care package, and he received the package quickly. I remember the day he was offered the package, I honestly felt like we'd won the lotto, knowing that we'd be able to access formal support via the funding that was available from the package.
Yeah. And I think I know what your answer's going to be for this one, Coral, but how was the package funding used to support Dad's needs?
Well, by the time Dad received his home care package, his needs were high, Shell, and as a family, we had been providing all the support up until that point. So we used the package to get carers in to help Mum care for Dad. So we had a carer come each morning to shower Dad when they could, and sit with him or take him for a walk, just to give Mum a break.
Yeah. Was the package funding enough to meet Dad's needs?
No, it was far from it, Shell. I used to go around to Mum and Dad's after work and shower Dad if the carer wasn't able to shower him in the morning, because, this was a task that was beyond Mum.
Yeah.
Our other sister used to visit Mum and Dad and spend time with Dad so that Mum could get things done, or if she needed to go to an appointment herself. And we reached the point as Dad's dementia had progressed, as he progressed towards the end of his life, that we had to privately fund for carers as well because his needs were so high.
Yeah. I just want to circle back to the delirium, Coral, as this is a topic that comes up a lot across social media and people aren't always clear about it. Did Dad ever develop a delirium?
He did, Shell, many times. Just after Dad was diagnosed, he had to have a knee replacement. The surgery was something we considered at length. I knew he would develop a delirium and I really wanted to avoid that, but not having the surgery wasn't an option.
Yeah.
His left knee was crumbling and causing him so much pain that he was struggling to walk. So he had the surgery and then the delirium developed immediately. The other times Dad developed delirium was after those strokes, the 4 strokes that he had in the last year of his life.
What did the delirium look like for Dad?
Well, it was terrible. It was very difficult.
Yep.
After his knee surgery, he had to keep that left leg immobilised, and this was impossible. He was so confused and disorientated and agitated in hospital, and he was hallucinating as well. It was terrible for all of us, seeing Dad so distressed and confused and not understanding what was going on, not understanding what had happened to his leg, where he was, who the strange people were that kept coming into his room, why the strange people were giving him medication. He didn't understand what the medication was for. And, he wasn't able to distinguish between night and day as well.
Yep.
He was so restless that I was sure he'd cause further injury to that recently repaired left knee. And then when Dad had the strokes, he developed delirium each time too, and it presented the same as the delirium after that knee surgery.
How was the delirium managed while he was in hospital, Coral?
We took it in turns to sit with Dad, Shell. So Mum and Sandy, our other sister, would visit Dad during the day and provide him the reassurance and familiarity that, that supported the resolution of the delirium.
Yep.
I used to stay overnight with Dad. The reason I stayed with Dad was because he was so agitated during the night, he didn't sleep, and he was trying to get out of bed all the time. The nurses were so busy, they just couldn't, they didn't have the time to be with him.
Yep.
So I stayed and I did what I could to calm him during the night. I used to play his favourite music very softly, and I spoke to him, reassuring him. we had a portable DVD player, and we played his favourite movies and music during the day, doing whatever we could to keep him awake so that he didn't reverse his sleep-wake cycle. And, in the hope that he would sleep during the night. During the day, we kept him in as much of a routine in hospital as we could. And when we were able to, we wheeled him around the ward and then outside in a wheelchair. Again, to keep him awake during the day. And also, it's really nice getting outside of hospital. So that was something that he responded to well. We brought up familiar items from home to his hospital room, like photo albums and familiar clothing. The doctors carefully managed his pain, and they prescribed antipsychotic medication as well. So delirium takes time to resolve, and knowing this, I knew that we just had to ride it out and, allow it to resolve over time.
Yeah. We've covered a lot again today, Coral. How we supported Mum to support Dad at home, keeping him well, and averting delirium where possible. But in the case of not being able to avoid the development of delirium, as in Dad's case, the surgery and the strokes, you've explained to our listeners what that looked like for Dad and how you managed that while he was in hospital. I think where we are up to now with Dad's story is how you managed to get Dad home after the 4th stroke, which was the big stroke. But we'll hold that part of the story over until next week. We hope we've been able to provide you with some reassurance that although things can be really difficult when a person is living with dementia, and certainly when they develop a delirium, that things can be okay too. Thank you for joining us today. Until next week, take care. Hey Care community, thanks for listening to this episode. So you never miss a show, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. If you'd like to know more about what we do, head to our website, cmeacn.com.au.